Hi, I'm Ryan Szymanski, curator for Battleship New Jersey Museum and Memorial. Today we've got a fun video for you. We're going to follow the wiring trunk for the armored conning tower all the way from here on third deck up to the top of the conning tower. But first, here's a word from the museum. So, we initially attempted to shoot this video as me climbing through this wiring trunk. And I did, all the way, except for one little point we'll show you later on. So first I tried to climb in from the bottom here, and the ladder rung and the hatch that we go through are only about this far apart. And it turns out that that math just don't work out. So I couldn't push my way up through it. I was hoping, hey, maybe if I go to the top and climb down, I'll just be able to drop through it on the bottom. Nope. The microphone pack that you guys got me, that I have in my back pocket here so you can actually hear what I'm saying, got caught on the bolt that holds the dog to that hatch, and there just wasn't enough room for me to make it down. So I did climb the whole thing down and then back up, and we've got some footage of that that'll show up later in the video. First off, we are at the extreme forward end of Broadway, the longest passage on the ship that goes down third deck. Behind me here is Central Station, so if you're looking at your booklet of general plans, this is us. We're right here at frame 86, which is the dividing point between the forward third of the ship, A section, and the amidships third of the ship, B section, which contains all the engineering spaces. And here is where we have the trunk that leads all the way up into the conning tower. And this is where all of the electrics for the command and control and probably some of the fire control wiring leads. It comes down this trunk, and then you can see this whole bundle mess over here that goes down in the engine room where the power is supplied from. So what is this trunk? This trunk is 16 inches thick, the armor for it. And the inside of it is, I don't know, it's probably about 3 feet inside diameter, but there's all sorts of wiring in there. And when I was in there, there was also a big dumb pole lock in there too, so it's hard to say exactly how big it is. Yeah, this hatch is approximately 1 curator wide. I had plenty of shoulder room on the sides, but when I was trying to bend my knee to get from one ladder rung to the next, it didn't quite work, so I had to pull chin up to get my foot to the next ladder rung, and that gets a little bit tiring, less so on the way down than on the way back up at the end. And it's only 7 stories tall. It goes from here all the way up to the deck just behind the steering wheel on the 04 navigation bridge inside the conning tower. So, all of this important command and control wiring is in this 16-inch thick armored trunk, and it doesn't need to be armored down here on third deck. We're inside the armored citadel now, and it doesn't need to be armored once it gets up to the 04 level, because that is where the actual armored conning tower begins. And the conning tower itself is a big structure that goes all the way down to main deck, and it's got this big angled structure that the armored part sits on top. But the whole thing is not armored. That is way too much top weight. On New Jersey, Missouri, and Wisconsin, only the 04 and 05 levels of the conning tower are armored. On Iowa, the 03 level is also armored. And it's possible that this trunk lets out there. If anybody from Iowa is watching this, let me know if you can follow this trunk up. It's a big frickin' round thing you're going to see for the rest of this video. And look at how little space there is between that and the ladder rung. It's somewhere between 6 and 8 inches, and that is not enough room to fit a curator through, either the top end or the bottom end, it turns out. Now you notice that this maybe 3 foot tall, probably 2.5 foot tall structure here, that is the Splinter Deck. And if you look at the top there, you see those big honking bolts and the cutouts around them. That's where the 16-inch armored tube is bolted to the 6-inch armored deck. That's a pretty cool feature. You can see that on the left-hand side here, there's a little bit of room and an access plate. I don't think that's enough room to get to that access plate, but it's there. And on your right-hand side and behind you, there is nothing but wiring. In fact, there's so much wiring you cannot even open the hatch all the way.
All right, so now we are, well, we're still at frame 86. We are amidships, obviously, and we are just forward of where we were before. So this is the forward side of our 16-inch trunk. This space, if you're looking at your 1984 New Jersey Booklet of General Plans PDF, which you can readily find online in a number of places, and we've posted in the link in the description below, is the Ordinance Technical Library. It accesses a berthing space just forward of us amidships, which at some point after that plan stopped being updated, was turned into the tool issue room. This series of spaces was the Ordnance Library, so there's shelves there where all of our technical publications would have been. We still have some of them. We've put them in a different space because they were removed from here and went through a number of warehouses and eventually ended up in a 5-inch magazine on Broadway, and then we got them into a different space. The rest of our Ordnance technical publications are still on Charleston, and hopefully we'll get those back when that vessel is scrapped. Check out the video in the description below for us talking about stripping parts off of Charleston. And there's also a link in the description below to our reference library where we talk a little bit about what's in there. Initially, there would have been a couple of different reference libraries on the ship, mostly divisional. So this is where the actual office was, and you've got a microfiche reader right there for going through all of your microfiche of the blueprints concerning Ordnance. And behind that, you can see the cutout for a door, and that leads into the Exo's trunk that leads down to Broadway. But for some reason they blanked it over on this ship and access was only through that berthing compartment. I do not know when or why, or if the other Iowas got that particular modernization. This space today, because it is the tool issue room, is used by our volunteers. So the volunteer tool issue room is up forward, and the paint locker is this aft part where the shelving was for the Ordnance. Anyway, small segue. Let's keep following this tube up to the main deck. So now we are on main deck, just forward of the wardroom, and here is the base of the conning tower. So as you can see, it starts out as an angle, and it continues at an angle up to about the O2 level, and that's where it straightens out on the O3, and then you've got the armored part above it that it's supporting. And if we go in here, which is used for air conditioning machinery for the various officers' berthing spaces in the wardroom, you can see that armored tube.
So now we're at the O1 level. In this first space is the ladder that goes up to the O2. We'll check that out in a minute. We've got some vestibule spaces here, which actually have steam radiators in them. These spaces were used as offices throughout the ship's career. Let's see, this is the G2 division. During World War II and the Korean War, this was a 40mm clipping room. So the ammunition would have been in racks on the bulkheads. They would have pulled that out, passed it through here to the 40mm guns on either side of the O1 level, just aft of turret 2, the ones that were later turned into swimming pools. Over here, we've got our 16-inch thick armored trunk that we've been following, and then more office space here. Let's go check out the other side. And you can see there's a big square wiring trunk or hoist of some sort in the back side. All right, so coming through on the port side here, we've got sprinkler system to radar magazine, and then this space over here which is our radar magazine. What in the heck's a radar? Check the link in the description below to a previous video we shot on this space. But basically, as built, this was another 40mm clipping room for the port side 40 mil. After that, it became a substance abuse office, which seems pretty abusive to me. And then, at some point in the mid-'80s, they converted it into RADO, which is Rocket-Assisted Takeoff. So the rockets that get strapped to our RPV drones, which have like a couple of horsepower lawnmower engine on them moving a propeller. So the rocket helps launch them, the rocket detaches just like a little space shuttle, and then the drone's onboard propeller takes off. So that's stored up here. It was a magazine space, it was a simple fix, it's a long distance away from where they actually need it. So not everything on the battleship makes sense. Here's the ladder leading up from the O1, and it comes into this small empty angled room. And this luxuriously large doorway. So we are now on the O2 level of the conning tower. Here is that armored trunk again. And what are some other features in here? We've got a second armored trunk or possibly hoist. And we've got a big pit of death for ventilation. On this side, they caged it in with expanded metal. Thanks, Navy. Over here, we've got the open access point, which I imagine would have been covered with expanded metal, and then they just caulked on galvanized sheet metal when the ship was mothballed. But this is possibly an uptake for engine room number 1. Possibly a ventilation uptake. I'm not entirely sure. I'd have to look at the plans again. But this unarmored part of the conning tower is just here with its angled sides to support the armor structure above us. The only armored part here is the 16-inch tube. So that's drawing air in and down that hole. And now let's go through this door. There's another just small storage space there. I imagine these internal bulkheads are here to help support the weight additionally. And then you come over here, and there's some armored grating down there. But just complete pit of death. The designers of the Star Wars universe apparently tried their hand at Iowa-class battleships. Now it's time to go up to the O3 level. In this conveniently placed oh, wait. This is why I rip so many pairs of jeans. All right, so we have just come up the bad ladder, and we're on the O3 level. On Iowa, the O3 level is armored and open like the O4 level conning tower, and this would be the flag bridge on Iowa. She was set up as a fleet flagship, which meant the O3 flag spaces had access to their own armored conning tower, and turret 2 did not have a 40mm gun on top because that would have obscured line of sight from here. Instead, it had a gun tub that was mounted lower down with 3 20mm on it. So, Here is the 16-inch thick armored wiring trunk that leads from the conning tower down. On New Jersey, this space isn't as heavily armored as on Iowa. Same for Missouri and Wisconsin. It's not armored. These ships were not set up as fleet flagships like Iowa and South Dakota. You can see the deck here is about an inch thick, but the deck overhead is about 7 inches thick. And look at this beefy counterweighted hatch. You can see the cable coming out the top, going over to a counterweight here. For some reason, the deck in here during the 80s was partially tiled. It looks like they laid square tiles wherever they would fit and just never finished with any of the tiles they had to cut. So I think they partially started working here and then decided this isn't really a habitable space. Although it's got all of our compartment bill holders, our bullseyes. It's even got 110 power, and this looks like a 1980s era outlet that's been run here. Let's see, other things we have here is part of the electromechanical system for opening and closing the armored doors of the conning tower. And you can see that it has leaked a lot of hydraulic fluid, which is collected on the deck. Going after, there's a small space that accesses wiring, but going forward, we have gone through a small void space, which I imagine doesn't exist on Iowa. But it does exist here to give extra support to the armored conning tower above us. Here's the other side of that tube. Here's one of the electric motors that I imagine is used for the door. And look at these bolts that are holding either the deck armor or the 17.3-inch armored walls of the conning tower in place. If you go through there, there's an access door to this space. That access door is locked on here, but it would have given easier access than that janky ladder.
So here's the other side of that locked door on the O3 level. This is where the Admiral's bridge is. You can go in there, but it's not a fully armored space and there's no visibility on this ship compared to Iowa. It is good access for some of the equipment for the doors up above. And here you can see some of that coming through the deck here. You can also see how thick the deck at the bottom of the conning tower is. And on the other side of this bulkhead is where the flag spaces we did have are. All 4 Iowas had flag spaces on the other side here, and little view slits that aren't quite armored, just splinter protection. And that is the sort of place that a Halsey or a Spruance would have, in theory, been in combat. So now we're on the O4 level, or the navigation bridge. And bridge instrumentation goes forward. The chart house is on the other side of this bulkhead. And you can't miss the big armored door that leads into the conning tower. The conning tower is the single thickest piece of armor plate on the entire ship. It's 17.3 inches thick. There is not anything else on this ship that is a single thicker plate.
Some other heavily armored places on the ship are the side pieces for the barbettes, which can be up to about 17.3 inches thick, although the front and backs are thinner. And the turret face plates, which are 17 inches thick, on top of a backing plate, which makes them layered more than 17.3 inches thick, but that's 2 separate pieces cast together. The bank vault door, as we've seen, has a motor which can open and close it because the thing weighs a couple of tons. And when it's in place,
you can lock it.
So let's go into the conning tower here. Watch your step. So here's the hatch that leads up from the O3 level. This is the one that had that big armored door on it. And you can notice there's a void space under the deck here for all of our wiring. It's all command and control equipment here. If we open up this deck plate, you can see all those cables. These are the cables that come up from that 16-inch thick armored trunk. Now, normally the deck here, these metal covers are closed and the deck is covered with this rubber decking. We peeled that up. To reveal this hatch. So this is the top side of our trunk. 7 stories down there, you might see the light, that is Broadway. So this 16-inch thick armored trunk goes all the way from Broadway up here to the conning tower. If in combat the systems up here are damaged and there's no way out, you can theoretically climb down this trunk here. Notice that there is a ladder installed, which is not common in wiring trunks, all the way to Broadway without leaving the armored part of the ship. It ain't easy. In addition to being able to climb down to Broadway while still being in the armored part of the ship, you can, of course, also climb down to third deck, which has all those ladders that lead you down to the O1 level, but that's not armored. Of course, the O4 level is where you would con the ship from in combat. We've got a small navigation booth back here, and then everything the captain needs up here. Communication equipment, steering, engine order telegraphs, rudder angle indicators, gyro compass, etc. We've got periscopes to see out. You'll notice we've got view slits in here, but those are more for ventilation than for actually being able to see anything. And we've got a ladder that leads up to the upper level of this 2-story armored structure. And here we are on the O5, the very top of the armored conning tower. This is the third main battery plot fire control position, or spot 3. In World War II, it had a fire control radar on top briefly, but spot 1 and 2 and the turret rangefinders, it was a really redundant space and ended up not being used for much. Nowadays, it has the modern surface search navigation radar on top, which feeds the navigation bridge. Even though this space doesn't feature any of the rangefinders that are normally associated with fire control, either radar or optical, you do have optical periscopes still, and they are still one of the positions you can fire the guns from in an emergency. You've got all of your information you need on where the various directors and gun turrets are looking, and you've got feeds from your fire control radars that are mounted on spot 1 and 2. So if something happens and those fire control positions are somehow knocked out, but you can still access their radars, you can control those from here. Or you can at least get a feed from here. So now we're going to try and climb out of this armored tube as if it were an emergency and see just how possible that was. It's fairly easy to remove the rubber and open this part of the hatch. And let's see how easy it is to fit down the ladder from this end. It was very hard, or it was impossible for me to fit from the bottom. So just to go back over my measurements, I'm about 6 feet, 72 inches tall. I am 19 inches across and 32 inches at the waist. So let's see if I can fit. So The last time I did something like this, I was crawling through a 16-inch gun barrel, so I'm pretty confident in my ability to get through here. I do some caving on the weekends, so tight spaces aren't an issue for me. And we've got an opening at the top and bottom and some airflow, so I'm not concerned about air in there. So here we go. Of course, they've got the ladder facing the wheel here, so I've got nothing really to grab onto. It's warm air. You can tell Broadway's heated. There's a wire on my butt. All right, so I have climbed down 7 stories to the bottom, and I guess one measurement I didn't give you at the top. I have a 10.5 shoe, and you can see I have considerably less than 10.5 inches here between this hatch and this ladder rung. This ladder rung sticks out considerably over the hatch, but is not in line with the ladders above. So we're going to see if this was too wide for me to climb up from the bottom. We're going to see if I can drop through from the top. Hey, here's something that says Guam 82.
So in theory, in addition to this being a wiring trunk that you can access to do electrical work if needed, it is also an emergency escape from the conning tower above. But it just doesn't work. Either they added too much wiring at some point, maybe during the 80s, so that a hatch no longer opens, or it never was designed to work. But with that lowest ladder rung and that hatch there, you cannot get up and you cannot get down from here. You can still climb down and up from the 04 level, 7 decks above, but that's about it. So in my climb through the conning tower, you could see 2 or 3 places some graffiti or sailor art. One of those is entirely too graphic. One of them is the word Guam. I can't remember if it said 82 or 86. And then there was another point where it had a sailor's name and the years he was on board and the word help. And I did take a picture of that we can put on the screen now.
So thank you for sticking with us for our climb through the conning tower today. Do you think you could fit up that ladder without suffering from claustrophobia? Let us know in the comment section down below. Battleship New Jersey receives operating support from the New Jersey Department of State, and also from a number of public and private institutions, including viewers like yourselves. In fact, donations from viewers like you allowed us to go from making 1 video a week to 5 videos a week. If you would like to support Battleship New Jersey, there's a link in the description below. And because we're making so much content, remember to like, share, and subscribe so that you're notified when that goes out. Thanks for watching.